Good afternoon. My name is Heather Brinkmeyer, and I will be discussing my recent literature review on recovery drinks. Athletes have high expectations to perform better, so it only makes sense that they take in effective and efficient recovery drinks. There are many different opinions on the best way to replenish your body with essential nutrients after exercise, which often leads to misinformed athletes, which is the sole purpose of why I had interest in this lit review, to compare and study the different types of effective recovery drinks and the ones that are said to hydrate, replenish, and rehydrate your body, and then ultimately determine which is all around more effective. Some questions that are asked within the lit review that will be answered are: what exactly makes up a good sports drink? And also there are some research studies that will be discussed on milk versus sports drinks versus water, vice versa, all around. And then also the question comes about if in some situations do some sports drinks or some drinks in general, are they more beneficial or harmful than others? Athletes tend to exercise for long periods of time at high intensities, and they lose a lot of essential nutrients and electrolytes, two of those being sodium and potassium. Sodium is depleted more than potassium, so therefore sports drinks are made up of a high concentration of sodium rather than potassium. Two of the largest causes of fatigue are loss of fluid and decreased carbohydrate stores. The goal of recovery drinks and their sole purpose is to replenish your body with the carb stores and to increase your fluid volume. Protein's role is to allow for your muscles to recover from the stress of physical activity and damage. When you're digesting and consuming protein shakes and protein drinks, you're increasing your lean muscle mass over a long period of time. Sports drinks. They are loaded with carbohydrates. They have a high concentration of sodium, as said before, high sugar content. They do replenish your body with sodium, carbohydrates, potassium, and these are all simple sugars, and they taste good, so they have their benefits. There was a study mentioned in the literature review where plain water, mineral water, was compared to carbonated water with an apple juice mixer, and then also compared to Gatorade, and they tested these subjects on VO2 max and their sweat samples. The result of this test was that Gatorade was the only drink after 1 hour that increased the hydration levels back to normal. There is also another test that was performed where they had endurance-trained cyclists. There were 7 subjects. They analyzed their sweat, urine, and blood. They consumed Gatorade, Powerade, and water. Water did not increase their voluntary contractions of their muscles, but Gatorade and Powerade did. And also, Gatorade had a higher carb concentration. The results were 6%, whereas Powerade was 8%. So, being as Gatorade and Powerade are both sports drinks, they dominated in this test as opposed to water. Milk, as I mentioned before, is loaded with protein. It also contains carbohydrates, electrolytes, and nutrients. Many tests have been performed testing low-fat milk, skim milk, and chocolate milk. When all these different types of milk were compared with sports drinks, protein from milk was the most effective in retaining fluid within the athletes. It helps the athletes stay hydrated for a longer period of time. Another study by the same researcher was performed on weightlifters. They used fat-free milk that was consumed after weightlifting. It increased their net muscle protein balance, their muscle protein synthesis, and lean body mass. Another study that was performed was the testing of the fluid balance multiple hours after exercise as opposed to immediately after exercise. Sports drinks that contain sodium, they kept the fluid balance positive within the athletes for 1 to 2 hours, whereas milk kept the positive fluid balance up to 4 hours. So I hypothesized in the beginning of my lit review that sports drinks would be the most effective recovery drink, but after doing my lit review, it seems as if milk is the most effective. because it contains natural protein and natural electrolytes and not as much sodium. It still gives you energy, but long periods of time it keeps you hydrated and aids in recovery and building lean muscle mass. If I were to do further research on this topic, I would ideally choose a large athletic team such as soccer or lacrosse and have a variety and even distribution of males and females. I would assume approximately 8 consecutive weeks of testing, 2 weeks for each type of recovery drink, which would be milk, sports drinks, and water, and then low-fat milk or chocolate milk. These athletes would consume one drink for 2 consecutive weeks and ideally be tested no less than 3 times a week. We would test their sweat levels, blood glucose levels, plasma volume, and electrolyte composition, and also your typical BMI and lean muscle and total fat percentage. We would continue to check these values for the 8 weeks but using different drinks, and each time we would test and record our numbers immediately after exercise, an hour after exercise, and then 3 hours after exercise. Once all the data is recorded and consumed and the study is over, we could then hopefully determine which type of recovery drink is more beneficial for athletes.